Brian Powell of I Run Far here with Chris Mocko before the 2017 Lake Sonoma 50 mile. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great, Brian.
I don't know where to start. This is our first interview together, but when did you've been running for quite a while? You raced competitively in high school and college. Walk us through some of your early running history.
Sure. Okay. So began in high school. Should I be looking at you?
Whatever you want.
What's a better way to do this? I began running in high school, kind of typical story. Played soccer, played basketball, went through this puberty thing.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it, lost all my coordination. So went from a 1-season runner to a 3-season runner. But was fortunate enough to be on a very, very good high school team. Had a teammate who ran 8:48, which at the time was very good, and ended up getting some offers to run in college. Mm-hmm. Turned those down to walk on to the Stanford team, and then kind of struggled for 4 or 5 years to kind of find my place on the team. Discovered that the steeplechase is where runners who aren't good at flat go to excel, and spent my final year, made it onto our varsity 7, ran at NCAAs where we finished 3rd, and then also qualified for NCAAs in the steeplechase. So ended up starting in a pretty modest place on the team, but ended up in a place that I was content with. Obviously wasn't running 13:20, but was pretty happy with what.
Yeah, I mean, what did you get down to in, say, 8K cross country?
Probably right around 5-minute pace.
Yeah.
My 5K was 14:20s. So respectable, but definitely not elite.
No, but I mean, especially coming into ultra running later on, coming from that strength base of cross country and steeplechase kind of is more prototypical than, being maybe the flat 10K guy or.
Yep, absolutely. The funny thing, the sad thing, I absolutely hated tempo runs and never touched a 10K track race. Never thought I would be a distance guy. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I graduated, the first thing that I wanted to do was run a marathon. So spent 6 years after college running halves and fulls, and loved that. Got my PRs down to 106 and 222. And honestly, 2015 rolls around, and I'm like, a lot of my friends have switched over to this trail running, and for most of them, I have better PRs than them in the roads.
Yeah.
Trails can't be that difficult. And so I thought I'd switch over and try trails, and spent the first 6 months of it eating a lot of humble pie, realizing there was no direct translation from what you can do in roads to trails.
Yeah, so what were some of those early missteps?
Well, the first awful one that hopefully there's no record of was a 24-hour race over in Christie Field in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I had paced a friend in a marathon, trying to break 4 hours, and I was like, I think I can run this pace pretty much forever. Felt really good after running like 35 miles in a day, which I'd never done before. So I was like, I'm going to sign up for a 24-hour race. Mm-hmm. And then spent 2 months geeking out on every single ultra running podcast. Hadn't been part of that world at all, and ran this race completely unprepared.
And when was this?
This was December 31st, 2013. And I went into it, probably started running 8-minute pace for the first couple hours, and I thought this was the easiest thing ever. I had friends that came and paced with me, and of course for them, that pace is terribly slow, so they pushed me a little bit harder than I should have gone. And by about hour 9, I had fallen apart.
Yeah.
And spent the last 12. I think I got through 5 marathons in 15 hours. Mm-hmm. And then the last marathon took another 9 hours. So it was a rough end to the evening, and the worst part was that it set me back for probably the next year and a half. I was injured for a very
all
long
running.
time. Yeah, all of running. All running was over.
Really, on sort of ultra running, you don't really start showing up again until 2015, yeah?
2015,
2016 even.
2016,
sorry,
yeah.
So like Black Canyon.
Yeah.
So what made you want to, you had this one attempt and it did not go well. What made you want to try it again?
I don't know what happened in the end of 2015, but I suddenly got this itch to do Western States. And that was the only race I knew about. So I immediately looked into figuring out how I could qualify. Mm-hmm. And spent maybe 2 months training for it. And my training looked like just going for very, very long runs. So I went for 35 to 40-mile runs, and even those I was avoiding hills. So I ended one run at the top of Mount Tam, but instead of staying on the trails, I was running on the roads all through Mill Valley, and I didn't understand what I was doing. Showed up at Black Canyon and just embarrassed myself, in my opinion. Went out very hard, didn't know how to pace myself during it. Sage was in the race, and so I thought, oh, if I run with him, that's my best strategy for qualifying. I was very nervous about being top 2 to hit that golden ticket, and did not run my own race at all, and suffered for it pretty terribly for the latter half and finished 3rd, so the worst place to be. But
eventually you found your way in.
Well, fortunately, I showed up at Way Too Cool the next month and had another very tough race. So Black Canyon did not have much climbing, so I was kind of grateful that I didn't have to deal with a lot of hills. I didn't spend any time doing hill work for the next month and kind of stuck to my road racing training program. And when I showed up to Way Too Cool, I got to the first climb and had to walk it. It was like a half mile, and I was walking it, and I was so embarrassed. And I don't know, I think I ended up finishing 8th.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
And it was muddy, and I was wearing flat Hokas that were road racing shoes, and slipping all over the place. And the saving grace for that race was that I met David Roach at the end of it, who said, "Hey, you should run with me. I can coach you." And after a month of running with him, I qualified at Gorge Waterfall, and kind of the rest is history.
Nice, yeah. You ended up finishing 7th at Western States, so respectable first go at 100 miles.
Yeah,
on the trails. So,
yeah, did not know what to expect going into it.
Yeah,
top 10 was obviously a goal. It was way harder than I could have possibly imagined. So, I had 200 Ks in my belt, so I knew what like a dark patch felt like, but the number of dark patches and the severity of them in Western States, I could not have predicted.
And then you went to the Rut in September.
Yeah. So I wish that didn't exist on my resume. So
well, it doesn't, in triplicate, in fact.
In triplicate. So yeah, Western States happened. I then had a trip to London, went to the Olympic trials to watch some friends race, took a lot of time off, mental break, and month of August really got back into it. And by the end of August was like, I'm ready to go. I'm fit, and I'm going to have a really good performance.
Yeah.
Had not heard of the sky running stuff and figured I'll give it a go. Did not even tell my coach until, the week before. And he was like, I don't think this is a good idea. You haven't trained for this. And I quoted him where he said before, if you're not having fun, then you're not doing it right. And I was like, I think this will be fun.
How much fun was it?
I had a very good time. But I learned that fitness does not translate to sky running, and there's some other key elements to it that I probably should have prepared for: altitude, acclimation, going up very steep hills. I actually signed up for the vertical kilometer, and I was like, that's not going to be that bad. Yeah. That's 1,000 feet in 3 miles. And then I did the whole, kilometer is actually 1,000 meters, which okay, that's a little bit worse. So
that engineering background came in handy before.
Yeah. Not a good weekend. So had a very interesting time on all the uphills there, and it was crazy how little of it was actually runnable, where you're actually going at like max pace, because it's just this really, really tough uphill climbing. And
then fast forward to March of this year, you raced 3 times, and then you ran a race yesterday as well. So how are you feeling after a 50K, I think a 30K and 250 milers?
Yeah. Pretty good.
You've been training really intensely as well, like volume-wise, pace-wise.
Yeah, so the big news was, I mentioned earlier, was that at the middle of February I quit my job, which has given me a lot more time to train. And I kind of went from 100 miles a week and maybe 5,000 feet of climbing to about 130 and 15 to 20,000 feet of climbing. And I'm getting a lot of comments and concerns from friends, family, like, you're doing too much, this is crazy. But what I don't think they realize is I have all day to do this.
Yeah.
I'm waking up, taking my time, easing into the day, doing a long warm-up. I spent about 2 hours with Norma, the Normatec recovery boots. So I have a ton of time there. There's naps during the day, but there's a lot more time to do things right. But I also know I'm kind of in this high risk, high reward situation where if I'm going to spend 6 months to do this full time, I'm not kind of going for the longevity play. I'm trying to see how good I can get in that time. And so, yes, there's a decent chance I'm going to get injured or burned out, but there's also a probability that I'm going to feel really good and have some good performances. And so far, it's
not. I mean, it is a high volume and high stress situation, but you're also. It's not that incredibly much higher than you've done for a very long time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's also trail miles, so it's a little bit slower. Downs and ups are obviously a little bit harder on the knees, but in general, it's not a crazy leap for me to do this.
Yeah. And you're here in Mill Valley. Are you training with the substantial number of pretty solid runners here?
I feel like they have something against me. We have not done a lot of runs together. I think they've tried, but 8 a.m. SFRC runs on the weekend is a little too early for me, and I really should have the motivation to get out and get it over with in the morning, but we haven't had a really easy time lining up runs so far, and I did try 1 or 2 of the TAM Tuesday runs, but again, those are 6 a.m., and ever since the daylight savings, it's been a little too dark to get out for those, so I need to do a better job of doing that.
So what was the thing behind quitting your job? I mean, you worked at Square as a pretty solid position, and you sort of said, what happened?
So there's a couple of things going on. One, I thought I had some potential to do something great in the sport, and I was really struggling with getting out to trails. So in order to run on the trails out here, I was waking up at 5, driving a half hour over the bridge, getting in a run, driving home, trying to get to work by 9, and then spend a day at work. That was tough. And every single morning it was like, I could wake up at 5, or I could sleep till 7 and just run in the city, and usually that won. But I knew I was not going to get better at trail running because I just wasn't running on trails. And I mean, even running on these now, I realize they're so nicely groomed that it's not the same experience as even a States course, which has a little bit more technical and a lot more rocky single track sections. But I wasn't going to get the time on the trails if I didn't move here. So part of it was like, if I move here, then I'm going to have a long commute into the city. That's going to take forever. And that literally was a big concern for me. That wasn't like, the other option is just quit my job. But that was a factor for sure. And then the other thing was I just wasn't as happy anymore going into work, and I was just drained every single day that I left the office. And I mean, 1,000 people have said this before, and I've never listened to it and believed that it's actually true, but it's like, follow your passions and you'll figure out the money and all that other stuff later. Hopefully that figures out. I think I've pocketed $400 so far from running, so not quite enough to pay the rent, my very small bills that I have right now, but
it's probably a pretty hefty food budget at this point.
Well, I do a weekly Costco trip, and I try to keep it under $50. So it's just
try not to go on Sundays.
Try not to go on Sundays. It's a little crazy on Sundays. I can afford to go during the weekdays because I have that time. But yeah, so it ended up being, not super happy with the job. I'd been there for 5 years, so I needed some change. A lot of folks at this time go on a sabbatical and go travel the world, and that's just not super appealing to me. But I do like running a lot, so I figured, why not do this? And in fact, I'm actually getting to travel to some pretty cool places.
You are. I mean, you were just in Moab a couple weeks ago. And
Moab, Auburn, California is a pretty cool spot. I'm going to France later this year, so there's going to be some interesting opportunities to do that. And I was sick and tired of making excuses like, that guy gets to do this full time. I'm never going to be able to be as good as him, and I finally want to give it a shot.
Nice. Well, we got Lake Sonoma 50 mile this weekend.
Yes.
You've just raced 4 races in just over a month. You've got a full calendar after this with U-Rock, Canyon, 100K, and then Western States. How much focus is going into this weekend?
Yeah. So Way Too Cool was the first race of the year and definitely was an important one for me, but I didn't have a lot of training going into that. I was a week out of my job, hadn't done much trail running, but I knew that was a big race, wanted to be ready for that. So that was my first kind of taper for the year. Lake Sonoma is very important. So of all the races I've done in the last month, none of them have been, really well tapered, and I definitely ran conservatively and kind of stepped off the gas when things looked like they were going pretty well. Lake Sonoma, I'm expecting to hurt a lot. And I'm very excited that it's such a deep field. I'm actually surprised. I don't think a lot of the folks up front are trying to get golden tickets. But maybe it's a secret move by them. But
I guess I haven't chatted with them recently, but I haven't heard any indication of that.
So it's exciting that there's just going to be this awesome field, and it amazes me that these races, I mean, they're extremely well run. I got an email that they're going to put me up in housing, which I've never gotten before. I'm like, wow, this is so cool.
Big time.
I've made it. But yeah, I'm just very excited to run this race. It just has an amazing history and very fast times. I think at one point during my 35K this past weekend, I was running at the 6-hour pace for a 50 miler. I'm like, this is pretty brisk. 7-minute pace with 10,000 feet of climbing is probably a pretty fast pace.
And I don't know if this goes all the way back to the beginning of Lake Sonoma, but at least in the last 5, 6, 7 years, every year, the winning time has been faster than the previous year. So
yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but I guess you'll give it a go.
I have to try. Yeah. This Jim Walmsley character took the one and only course record I had at Gorge Waterfall, so I'm a little bitter about that. So
might have to.
Worst case, I'm just gonna hammer one hill in the middle of the race and just get one CR so he gets an alert. So Jim, I'm coming for you. But I don't. That course record's gonna be a little out of reach. That seems a little aggressive.
Well, no matter what it is, good luck out there, Chris, and
so much.
have fun.
Thank you.